something we were talking about before was how you were in radio before. So you're putting on the headphones because you're in radio before. And what's interesting about that to me, there's a lot interesting about that, but I think a lot of people in our community of women are scared to pivot and are scared to really follow their calling and their dream calling because they're doing something that's working. And for you, radio was working, you were really successful, but there was a moment that you chose to pivot and do something that felt more aligned. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh God, my pleasure. Yeah. This is the thing that it really comes down to for me. And there's so much conversation around purpose, right? Like so much conversation, probably for the first time ever. Our parents, their parents before them, the concept of purpose, were like, what are you talking about? You get a job, you earn a pension, you retire, you die. It's like that was like the fullness of what so many people's visions were for themselves. And I think when we dive into that deeper desire, that yearning, that connection to purpose, it's so important that we see it not through the lens of the societal structure that we're in. So to be in your purpose, to be in alignment, to do something that feels nourishing every day, you can have any job title with that. And I think it's so important for women to know that, because when we get that inkling that like, I want more for me, or I want my life to feel like more, we think that means let me quit everything and let me set out. That's it. I'm walking in, I'm quitting my job, I'm selling my things, I'm gonna, and what purpose really is, and you can do that because that can turn out well, but what purpose really is just understanding what are my unique God-given gifts? What is my mission? Anything you do, you can infuse more of yourself in. Wherever you are right now, there's opportunity to take a moment to get more deeply connected with self and do an internal pivot, not necessarily an external pivot. Not everybody is called to blow up their life, or not everybody is called to, experience financial hardship or think that they have to change everything about their lifestyle or their structure. Sometimes it's really just, let me identify more of who I am. What is my personal truth? How can I show up as the most authentic version of myself under this umbrella? And I think it's so interesting because when we're open to that, speaking to having come from radio, I didn't necessarily know if I'd use my voice again. I just knew I wanted to serve in a different way. Working in radio felt amazing, not just because I got to show up and talk all day, but the deeper part of it was my connection to my listeners. I was in terrestrial FM radio, so that's where people do call you on the request line and ask for a song or check in on your day. And that was my driving force. It was being able to show up and serve with the tools that I had at the time, And so for me, that was allowing someone to hear my smile as I talked, and potentially that gave them something that they needed. Or, doing this podcast, like it's so, to share your voice inside of someone else's head is a sacred responsibility. Like it is more so than even doing on camera work, the intimacy of that, of living in someone's mind and sharing that moment with them, And so when I decided to leave radio, I knew I was still going to really crave that, but I didn't know if I'd ever use my voice again in any way. But I took that kind of leap of knowing there's a deepening that I'm called to do. I don't fully know what it is, but there's a deepening here that needs to happen. I'm meant to use my voice in a way that helps people heal, not just entertains them. And, when I kind of made that choice of like, how can I show up more fully in myself so that I can more fully show up in the world? It was just this instant manifestation. Like things just started making sense. It wasn't a fight against. It was just like a beautiful flow and allow, a receive.
I think sometimes, in my experience and what I've just kind of heard from our listeners a lot is like they get tripped up around the money aspect. And so always feeling like they need to make money with that purpose, or feeling like taking that leap and really going for it, they're so consumed by how am I going to make a living in the meantime. And we talk a little bit about that, but I'm curious like what your relationship has been during these pivots with abundance and with money, because I think, so much of it is mindset, but I'd love to like kind of just, look under the hood during that time.
Oh, yes. And, I've done it both ways. So the first pivot I ever took in my life was when I started in radio really young. I started at 18. So I had some really cool opportunities really young. But then that meant I also got burned out a little quicker. Mm-hmm. And so I remember I was working at a radio station in LA, the station I started at. And as many people know, sometimes the companies you start at, they can only see you in a certain kind of way in the role that you entered the company with, right? There's not really room for them to behold the fullness of who you've become or the expertise you've amassed. And so then usually you have to go to grow. And so I remember at this time, I think I was like 23, 24, and I had nothing. Like I had nothing. Like I was like, I had, a little studio apartment, and I was eating SpaghettiOs and, the $5 footlongs, trying to make it stretch. But I was showing up, and at that age, you don't need much. And I remember I was just like, God's voice spoke to me so clearly. He said, you have to leave. If you don't leave right this second, you never will. And I got up and I walked in my boss's office and I said, I'm so sorry. And I can't even give you a 2-week. I'm leaving. I had nothing lined up. And we had just got our check. So I wouldn't even be in the next pay period to receive a paycheck. And then I walked out, I packed my box, and I got out and I said, oh, what the hell? What did I just do? But I knew to heed the call. And I think it's really important to know when you're searching for the best possible decision on your life, what is the true call and what is your ego's call? Am I doing this because of how I feel about myself, how I think someone else is feeling about me, what I want people to perceive? Or am I doing this out of deep abiding because there is a truth inside of me that would never make sense to someone else, but I have to listen to it? And so I took a leap of faith. I didn't work for 4 months. I was very broke. I was selling things. I was like writing bios for different artists I knew to like stay afloat and like doing voiceover work. I was like voicing infomercials. And then I got an opportunity to move out of state and do radio. And I knew I needed that for that leg of my journey. Flashing forward, and it all worked out, but, and then flashing forward several years later when I really knew that it was time to make a pivot into something that felt more fulfilling. That time I kind of really bided my time. So I understood that a pivot was coming. Having been through one, I kind of knew how that would play out, like what that feels like. You make the initial choice, you're really excited, then there's a big lull and the universe is kind of figuring itself out and you are figuring out and refining your vision for yourself. So I knew to slow down this second go time. I knew, hey, you're probably going to get really insecure at some point. You're probably going to get depressed, then you're going to get excited, then you're going to get depressed. And so I just kind of settled into that map of knowing. But it took me a year to pull the plug. And in that year, I slowly started getting myself prepared. So I was saving, I was taking on more opportunities so I could put that money to the side. I was maximizing my relationships and the job that I had. I knew that I was probably going to go from that radio station. And so I was making sure to really reach out and get to know clients and get to know people on a more human level if there was ever opportunity to engage in something in the future, which I didn't know, And so when I made the decision that second time, I had a little bit more of a blueprint, but I still didn't know what was going to happen. So I think, for women listening that are in this space, it's just so important really to get still, really to get quiet. Do not make rash decisions. Really sit. Is this the best self-honoring choice that I can make? Is this fully aligned with my life's mission, with what I receive as my purpose, with what I think will connect to a life that feels more full and fulfilling? Or am I being comparative? Am I, doing this for perception? Am I doing this for ego? Am I making this choice out of my wounding or out of my growth?
Thank you so much for tuning in to Morning Microdose by Almost 30.
We hope you enjoyed waking up.
As always, we encourage you to take what resonates and leave the rest. If you enjoyed this trip, tune into the full episode on the Almost 30 podcast. All episode information can be found in the show notes.
Make sure to subscribe, and if this becomes a part of your morning routine, be sure to share it with a friend. We have new inspiring doses Monday through Friday. Follow us on Instagram at Morning Microdose, and follow Almost 30 at Almost 30 Podcast.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the vortex.